All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين والعاقبة للمتقين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على عبدك ورسولك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. So the topic tonight actually is a one-off. It was one that was requested by a few people. And I decided that we just go ahead and we'd fill in our talk tonight, inshallah ta'ala, with that particular discussion, because I feel like it's one that comes up very often, and it connects to what we spoke about a couple of nights ago. A couple of nights ago, we talked about this concept of hardship, being pleased with Allah, even if I'm not necessarily pleased with my circumstances, right? And there's a question that comes up. At what point do I stop making dua for something? At what point do I stop praying for something? See, meaning, I'm not praying for something wrong, or I don't think I am. I asked Allah for something that I thought was good. At what point do I take a hint from the divine and say, you know what, maybe I should not keep on making dua for the same thing over and over and over again? So that topic came up, and I wanted to cover some of the foundations of that discussion on delayed ijaba, delayed answer to dua, and of course, eventually fade into that question as a whole. So let's lay the foundations to how we answer that question in the very first place. Number one, no is an answer. All right? So you can't say Allah didn't answer me if Allah answered no. All right? No is also an answer. So Allah says, call upon me and I will answer you. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. So the answer is no. That's also an answer. All right. So we have sometimes what we take as no answer is actually the answer of no, and that's a very big problem when you're talking about how you approach dua as a whole. So that's the very first thing. Number two, Allah lays the condition that if you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to answer you, then make sure you answer Him as well. Your relationship with God can't be transactional. I'm going to say that again. Your relationship with God can't be transactional. It can't be that I want something done, so let me go ahead and call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? Your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to be more than that. Okay? More than that. All right. The next thing in that regard, there are things that inherently prevent a dua from being answered. And that would be sins, right? There are ways in which sins can prevent a dua from being answered altogether. And then the last foundation really plays or really fades into this larger discussion of the delay, that we as human beings are very hasty. And hastiness is a relative term. What that means is that what's considered slow and what's considered fast depends on the pace that is determined in accordance with a particular people's context. Meaning what? How many of you remember dial-up internet? You guys remember dial-up internet? Some of you don't. You're showing your age. All right. Dial-up internet. Remember AOL 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0? The funny sound started getting a little less funny. It started logging on a little bit quicker. We used to switch between Earthlink and all those different types of things and try to figure out dial-up internet. That was fast, or what we would have considered fast has changed, right? What we would have considered fast is changed. Now you look at, how fast you can make your already fast. Just make it rapid, right? And sometimes it's so fast that you can't even tell, so you have to do one of those speed tests, right? See how fast it's going. So pace changes. And our overall lack of attention span also plays into our expectation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in dua, by the way. خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ مِنْ عَجَلٍ. All right, so people were already created hasty in their nature. And if you could define the 21st century, you could define it by many themes, but one of the things you could define it by is definitely haste. That we are a more hasty portion of humanity than possibly any other group of humanity that's ever existed by virtue of what's available to us. Right? We are hastier now because we can get things done quicker now than ever before. With haste comes impatience. With haste comes laziness. With haste comes impatience. With haste comes laziness, both of which are detrimental to spirituality, right? So now you got Alexa, all right? And she's not mahram to you, all right? No, she's kind of weird. I'm just going to say that, all right? I'm going to put that out there. It's something weird about having a robot in your room. But turn off the lights. You just give commands and you get it done. You can't even get up to do something anymore. Everything is just spoken. So with ajal comes impatience and also laziness. Both of the things that find themselves within the equation of dua that Allah mentions, that the Prophet ﷺ mentions. Because the first one is, don't be hasty with Allah, don't get impatient with Allah. The second one is, have your own agency. You've got to do your part. So both of those things are eliminated by accessibility and by the relative ease with which we get everything else done in life. All right? The convenience and the relative ease of which we get everything else we've done in life. So let's put it this way. You want to upgrade your dial-up connection in dua to, fiber without making the proper, jump within your own spirituality for that to actually be a realizable goal. All right? The Prophet ﷺ also mentioned that a general quality, al-ajalatu min ash-shaytan, hastiness is from the devil. Meaning hastiness is not just problematic in dua and supplication. Hastiness is problematic in everything that you do. Okay? Hastiness means you ignore details, important details, even if you're doing something that's not necessarily bad, that's good in its nature. Hastiness means that you get frustrated very easily, right? Hastiness means that you're impatient with the promise of Jannah, because I'm not really sure that Jannah is there and that I'm going to get what I really want to get in Jannah, so let me go ahead and try to create my imperfect paradise in this world, because I'm not so sure about a perfect paradise anymore, or I don't know that I'm going to make it to that perfect paradise quick enough. So let me go ahead and hurry up and create my flawed paradise, my imperfect paradise in this world. So there's impatience with the nafs, impatience with the soul, right? So haste is a problematic quality in general that needs to be tamed. So if you want to tame hastiness in dua, you need to tame hastiness as a quality. All right? Learn to be more composed, learn to pace yourself, learn to work for things that you're not necessarily going to see the result of in any foreseeable future. All right? Learn to work for things, learn to nourish seeds that will give their fruit later on in life. Right? If you think about successful business people, most people that made it in life, if you think about it from a dunyawi perspective, from a worldly perspective, from a material perspective, they did not get rich off of a get-rich-quick scam. Some people did. Some people just struck gold. Something happened and they just got really, really lucky, quote-unquote lucky, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested them. They came across something and something happened to where they struck gold and it just happened. Most people worked really, really, really hard. But you can't package that in an infomercial. All right, just hard work and grinding and doing what you have to do to succeed. Right? Because that's not attractive, right? That's not what that doesn't come in a can. It doesn't come packaged. It doesn't come with a nice ad. That's just hard work, and most people are not willing to put in the hard work for success to be realized from a worldly perspective. That translates into laziness with your spirituality too. Meaning if you're mediocre in your pursuit, you're mediocre in your pursuit. If you're mediocre in your pursuit of dunya, then you're mediocre in your pursuit of akhirah. If you don't have ihsan, that's what the khatira was about today, right? The talk was about today. If you don't have ihsan, excellence in one thing, you're not going to have ihsan in anything. You have to develop a quality of ihsan, a quality of pursuit, a quality of perfection, a quality of attention to detail, a quality of patience while you try to make something happen. That's something that you have to develop as a trait, as a quality. So now, how do we get to dua? So we set both the creedal aspects, the foundations, and then we set the personality aspects of it. That you want to eliminate haste as a whole. Al-ajal is a bad trait to have, and you need to do away with hastiness, and you need to do away with laziness, and you need to learn to be more patient when you try to seek out the results of something. a few things here as well, and this is the last thing, then I'm going to go to the particular reading that we're going to do for tonight, inshallah ta'ala. We also know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers your dua in one of three ways. So, again, we said sometimes no is an answer. The first way is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you what you ask Him for. The second way is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala averts a harm that is equivalent to that dua. So basically Allah says no and it's for your own good. He holds it back from you because it's for your own good. And the third one is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saves it for you in the hereafter. Okay? He saves it for you in the hereafter. All right? The point is that no dua, no supplication is made in vain. Even the dua of Iblis, even the dua of the devil was not made in vain. And this can get really interesting for people. Okay? There's the dua of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The saying of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about this man that's lost in the desert, and he calls out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he says, Ya Rab, oh my Lord, oh my Lord. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, his food is haram, his drink is haram, غُذِيَ بِالْحَرَامِ, his clothes are haram, he nourished himself with haram. أَنَّا يُسْتَجَابُ لَهُ, how can he be answered? But then Allah tells us in the Quran that Shaitan said, قَالَ رَبِّي أَنظِرْنِي إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ, delay me until a day or give me respite until the last moment. So give me a delay. The ulama reconcile the two with a few things. Number one, that the shaitan had so much good that he had done prior to his fall that was the currency with which he brought to his dua. That's one that the scholars mentioned. The second one is that sometimes Allah curses a wicked person by giving them exactly what they ask for. And He blesses a righteous person by withholding from them exactly what they're asking for. So sometimes the answer to the dua of a wicked one is actually a curse. Shaitan being granted respite is not good for him. He's making his hellfire worse. He's making his misery worse. So he did not ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something good for him. He asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something bad for him. And that is in fact a punishment for him that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted him that respite, though he thought it was good for him. So it's an interesting way that you find that the scholars reason with these different texts. Now, the particular text that we're going to go over tonight, which addresses this idea of delay, ta'khir al-ijaba, delay in the answer to your dua. I make dua, I don't get the answer. At some point, what's the point of dua? And that's what the Prophet ﷺ said the real harm is. There's a hadith in Bukhari and Muslim, it's a long hadith and I'll paraphrase it, where the Prophet ﷺ says, يَظَلَّ الْعَبْدُ يَدْعُو, a servant keeps on calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah will answer him so long as he does not say, I made dua for such and such, and Allah did not answer me, and then he gives up his dua as a whole, meaning he stops supplicating as a whole, he stops believing in dua and the power of dua. So because of this one dua that I was making, and I wasn't getting the answer that I wanted, right? I forsake dua as a whole. وَالدُّعَاء هُوَ الْعِبَادَةِ, and the Prophet ﷺ said supplication is worship, is the essence of worship. So I forsake dua, I forsake worship. What's the point of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anymore? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala withholds the answer, and you lose out on your worship because you start giving up on your worship. The problem is not in the dua, the problem is in the expectation and the approach that you had to worship in the first place. And this speaks to what we spoke about, that you cannot, a few nights ago we talked about this, you cannot be content in this world unless you know your purpose. If your purpose is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rather than to please self, then that will not be compromised by any of the circumstances of this world. If your purpose is to use Allah to please self and use everything around you, including religion, to please self, then you will always be miserable because the self will never be pleased enough. So eventually all of that will diminish and you'll give up on it, right? So when it comes to dua, you have to connect it to purpose. So anyway, what I'm going to read, inshallah, I'm actually going to read the translation of this. It's a chapter in the book Sayyid al-Khatir by an Imam ibn al-Jawzee rahimahullah ta'ala. Sayyid al-Khatir is a book of spirituality by the great Imam ibn al-Jawzee, and it's the chapter is Asrar al-Hirman, the secrets of being deprived, the secrets of deprivation. So he writes in a very poetic way. He tells the story about himself, and in the process of telling the story about himself, we learn a lot of lessons. And by the way, Sheikh Muhammad al-Shinawi, who of course is one of the scholars at Yaqeen Institute, a dear friend of mine, he actually translated this. So you can find it if you look online, the delayed dua syndrome. The delayed dua syndrome, you'll find the translation by Sheikh Muhammad al-Shinawi of this particular passage. So Ibn al-Jawzee rahimahullah ta'ala writes, he says, one day I was struck by a particular hardship and I made profuse dua appealing for comfort and a way out. The response from Allah was delayed, and so my soul was consumed by worry and anxiety. So I shouted at my soul. I said, Ma biki, what is it with you? Think of your condition. Are you an owner or are you one that is owned? Are you a planner or are you one that is planned for? Okay? Don't you know that this life is but a land of trials and tribulation? If you request your wants and are not patient with whatever outcomes don't match your preferences, then what's the point of test? If every time you request, if it's like a genie in a bottle type deal, if that's how dua works, what's the point of لِنَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, that you'll be tested? There's no point of test then. There's no test in this world. If that's what faith is, then there is no test. If literally, because then people would become Muslim just because, well, clearly it works. It's a tool of attaining dunya. So if the believer was answered in the way that the believer wanted to be answered, you made dua and it just right in front of you, number one, that means that Allah is not in control, because the way that irad al-kawniyah, the universal will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works, is that all forces work in a singular direction. Even the evil forces are coalesced with good forces to form a perfect equilibrium in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will and in the way that the world proceeds. So even when an evil person is working evil, it's still not outside of the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, though the evil only belongs to the one who does evil. So if it's just, I make dua for whatever I want and then poof, it's like the genie in the bottle, okay? All right? That doesn't make sense. It's not going to, it completely disrupts the harmony of the way that the world is supposed to work, and it disrupts the entire purpose of a Rabb, of a Lord that is in control. So are you the owner, or are you the one that is owned? Are you the planner, or are you the one that is planned for? Don't you know that this world is a life of test? And what's the point of test if every time you asked Allah for your wants, it matched, the answer matched your particular preferences? Are trials anything except the denial and opposition of one's desires? Realize what it means to be accountable, and only then will the hardships become erased, and only then will the calamities appear trivial. So you got to go back to your purpose, and then the tests and the trials become trivial in their nature in the first place. Okay? So the first point that's being made is that you're not the one who plans. Allah is the one who plans. You're not the owner. Allah is the one who owns you. You know, subhanAllah, from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that even when you question the way that He's planning for you, He's still planning in your favor. That's mercy. That's supreme rahmah, right? That's supreme mercy. Like if you're trying to do someone a favor and they're not recognizing your favor upon them, you say, you know what? Go. Allah still plans in your favor, even as you show hesitation with His plan. That's mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So are you the planner, or are you the one who's being planned for? Are you the owner or the one who's being owned? Meaning Allah doesn't work for you, you work for Him. Let's clarify your relationship with God. He doesn't work for you, you work for Him. Any invitation He gives to you to call upon Him is the invitation of a king to a citizen, a master to a slave, not come own me. You still remain in the capacity of a slave, and you still remain in the capacity of a beggar. You never get to assume the other role, even if your dua is awesome. He still remains in control when you ask Him, but He shows you that mercy as you ask Him. So anyway, he starts to go down. This becomes very beautiful. He says, when my soul thought over what I said, its panic slightly subsided. I then told it, Wali jawab akhir, and I have another answer for you. So he's like writing out this conversation he's having with himself. You demand from Allah your wants, but you don't demand from yourself its duties. You demand from Allah your wants, what your nafs wants, but then you don't place demands on your nafs for what it is obligated to do. And that is the epitome of ignorance. What is more appropriate is the very opposite. Since you are owned by him, the sound-minded slaves demand from themselves the rights of the master and know that the master is not obligated to fulfill the slave's wishes. So he starts with this now. How can you demand from Allah what the self wants if you don't demand from the self what Allah commands it? So what you'll find in this monologue, if you will, or it's a dialogue between him and his nafs and himself, is that you find a person who's giving a tartib, giving an order for what you have to cover before you make your ask. So the first thing, don't demand from Allah what your nafs wants, what your self wants, without demanding from yourself what Allah commands it to do. Because that would, again, compromise the very nature of your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the first place. And basically, if you want to get more from the master, then you need to be a better abd. You need to be a better servant. So the servant understands that by fulfilling more of the master's duties, that they rise up in the master's favor and the king's favor, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows upon that person. Then he says, my soul calmed more than it had before. So he's like, I'm calming down my nafs. I'm in a hardship and I'm not getting my answer to dua. I'm calming down myself. He said, the self calmed down more. And I said to him, or I told it, I have a third answer for you. You are the one who delayed the response and blockaded its path with your sins. Had you opened its roads, it would not have been hastened. It's as if you don't know that the ingredient for comfort is taqwa. Have you not heard the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ Whoever has the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the consciousness of Allah, He will make a way out for him and provide for him. And whoever has the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will place ease for him in all of his affairs. Don't you understand that the opposite of taqwa, the opposite of God consciousness, results in the opposite? Oh, how the drunkenness of ghafla, of being heedless, prevents the water from reaching the land of our wishes. All right, I'm going to deconstruct that a little bit. I said this 2 nights ago, that it's naive and it's wrong to say that all hardships are caused because of your sins. So when you're being tested, you say, Allah is punishing me. All right? Because there are 2 ayat and they are not in tension with one another. Or 2 divine revelations, one in the form of the ayah, one in the form of the hadith, in the form of the ayah. وَمَا أَصَابَ مِن مُصِيبَةٍ, that no trial comes to you except بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ, because of what your hands have earned. And then the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, إِنَّ اللَّهِ إِذَا حَبَّ عَبْدًا ابْتَلَاهُ. If Allah loves a person, He tests him. Those aren't intention, because a test might come to you, or a trial might come to you for 2 different reasons. Okay, so they're not intention. And you don't know why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does what He does. But when you insist upon a sin and you see a hardship come in your life, it is good for you as a means of disconnecting from that sin to attach the sin to the hardship. Is that clear to everybody? Or do I need to elaborate a little bit more? Yes, elaborate more. If I am committing a sin over and over and over again, consciously, knowingly, stubbornly, arrogantly, like let's say I'm earning a haram income. All right, I'm earning a haram income. Or I'm doing something to someone. I'm wronging a family member. I'm wronging a brother or a sister or something like that. But I'm insisting upon a sin. Because Allah expects us to sin. But what Allah commands us not to do, وَلَمْ يُصِرُّوا عَلَى مَا فَعَلُوا وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ, they don't knowingly insist upon sin. They don't stubbornly insist upon sin. If in the process of committing my sin over and over and over again, something bad happens, and I say, this is Allah punishing me, or this is Allah telling me, you better quit or else, that's a good thing. So you can quit the sin. You need it. It's medicine for you. It's therapeutic. It has a good result. So you're telling yourself, this was a warning from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because ultimately everything is a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Everything is a sign of Allah's mercy, and everything is a sign of Allah's potential punishment. Because everything is a sign of Allah's mercy upon you, but everything also lends itself to the fact that Allah has power, ultimate power. right? So you remind yourself and you say, you know what, I need to quit this because if I don't, then something else might happen, and these trials that I'm reaping in my life are because of my sins. The point that Ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah makes here, that the greatest way to have what you want fulfilled by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taqwa, is being a person of God consciousness. Being a person of God consciousness. Now, I know it's late. I can see some of you guys kind of tired. I want you to pay very close attention to this particular point that I'm about to make here, inshallah ta'ala. Because the purpose of Ramadan, after all, is what? Taqwa. The purpose of Ramadan is God consciousness. The purpose of revelation is taqwa. Okay? Ya ayyuhan, the first command in the Quran, Ya ayyuhan nasu u'budu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum walladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. O people, u'budu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum walladhina min qablikum, worship your Lord who created you and created those before you so that you may attain God consciousness, so that you may attain taqwa. All right? So here's the point that I want to make. How does taqwa play into dua? How does taqwa play into dua? Most of the time, we forsake our principles. We forsake our principles out of hastiness to attain something, to get something, because we think that that's the only way we can get there. So when we become frustrated enough in our dua, and very few people will vocalize that. Very few believers will say, you know what, I'm not making dua anymore. I'm going to stop calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah doesn't give me anything. The only way to get this is to play dirty. The easiest excuse of like every businessman. Everybody else plays dirty. You want to succeed in this field? Got to play dirty like everybody else. You're not overtly saying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, Ya Allah, I'm not going to call upon you for rizq. I'm going to do it my own way. You're not vocalizing that, but your actions are saying that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That you're not capable of giving me the rizq, the sustenance, without me compromising some of myself here. So I'm going to go about it my own way, meaning I'm going to entrust myself to myself. All right? And then, when things start getting really, really, really rocky, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. And then you come to the Shaykh and say, I tried. You never tried. You never entrusted yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You entrusted yourself to yourself. But Allah was your insurance plan or your scapegoat, depending on where you are on that spectrum. All right? You entrusted yourself to yourself the entire time. Because you were ready to forsake principle and to engage in sin because that's the only way I can get there. So what's he saying? The ingredient of the reason what causes the water to reach the land of your wishes is taqwa. Because وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. Whoever has consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will make a way out for him and will provide for him from ways that he did not even think about in the first place. You know what's very profound about that? Number one, Allah doesn't tell you how hard the makhraj is going to be to get to. But it's there. All right? But if your taqwa, if your deen is your priority, your religion is your priority, you won't compromise your religion to get an easier exit out. You're not going to break the window. You're going to look for the exit. You'll take the extra effort to look for the exit and to have a smooth way out. So you won't compromise your deen in the process. And then you get out and you go, but wait a minute, but I lost this in the process. I lost that in the process. Allah does not guarantee you, because again, what's the point of test then? That He's going to give you in the same way that you were pursuing. Example, brother told me that I'm going to give up selling alcohol in my gas station, even though it's 30% of my sales. So mashallah, good for you. All right? He said, Allah's going to replace it, right? I said, yeah. Came back 2 years later, like really upset with me. He said, you said Allah was going to replace it. All right? And it was really interesting because I walked into his gas station like a week after he took the alcohol back, and like on the shelves where he used to sell alcohol, I don't know why, he had Buddha statues. And I was like, you went from alcohol to Buddha, like you got to put some candy on those shelves. All right? But he was upset with me. Like, you did this to me, right? You told me that everything would be okay and I'd get more. Allah would give me rizq. I said, yeah, so what's the point? He said that I lost 30% of my sales, right? So I didn't grow, like Allah didn't replace, not like other stuff kept on happening. So I told him, okay, I sat him down and I said, all right, well, look, you were having problems in your marriage a couple of years ago, weren't you? He said, yeah. I said, are you still having problems in your marriage? He was like, no, actually, funny enough, no, they're good now. Alhamdulillah, things have settled down on that front. I was like, and you're still being provided for, right? And I said, what are some good things that have happened in your life that weren't happening before? So he actually started to sit there and list like 5, 10 good things. And I said, you're not crediting any of that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I said, have you gone broke, failed to make a payment on your house, everything else fall apart? So what was the problem? The problem was he was crediting everything good to himself and crediting every delay and every deficiency to Allah. That's your problem. So what that means is, يَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ, Allah will provide you in ways that you did not even consider it before. Things happen in other parts of your life that stabilize its overall quality. And Allah provides for you because of your taqwa. Allah gives you what's good for you because of your taqwa. So again, it's not genie in a bottle. It doesn't work that way. Okay? But what he says here is that if taqwa is the reason by which Allah does good things for you in the first place, then how can engaging in heedlessness and sin bring about any good in my life? Okay? How can engaging in heedlessness and sin bring about any good in my life? So here's the connection for you all with these types of things. So if I forsake something bad for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in one area of my life, it may be that Allah will provide me in other areas of my life. All right? So if I show taqwa with something in one area of my life, it may be that good things will happen in other areas of my life. Allah will provide me and boost me in other areas of my life. On the opposite side of that coin, if I am sinning stubbornly, intentionally, arrogantly in one area of my life, I should not assume that another good area of my life is going to persist. And if I struggle in any other area of my life, I need to attribute it to that sin so that I can relinquish it and start with that in the first place. All right, does that make sense? The connection between the two? All right, so let's continue in this interesting dialogue. All right, so that's the second one he mentions, taqwa. All right, he said, that taqwa is what brings about goodness in your life in the first place. Okay, and with taqwa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes care of you and gives you things that are good for you, even if you're not necessarily asking for them. All right. So if you think about Maryam alayhi salam, when Maryam alayhi salam was given the blessing of being pregnant with Jesus, with Isa alayhi salam, she thought that was the worst thing in the world that happened to her. It was the best thing that happened to her. She didn't ask Allah for a child. She wasn't asking Allah to get pregnant. She wasn't even married. Like, wait, what's happening here? She thought that this was the worst thing that was happening to her, but because of her taqwa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave her something that was beyond the furthest imagination for her that actually turned out to be good for her. It actually turned out to be absolutely good for her, to be a great thing for her. Okay? So the point is that taqwa brings goodness in your life regardless. Ibadah brings goodness in your life regardless. And by the way, the purpose of dua, first and foremost, is to establish a connection between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah loves to hear your voice. Allah loves to hear you call out to Him. But the number one reason for goodness coming in a person's life is righteousness and piety. And the number one reason for hardship coming in your life is not that you didn't make dua to Allah enough to not have hardship, or that you didn't make dua to remove that hardship. It's doing things that are not pleasing to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, then my soul conceded to me that this was the truth. So my soul became calm. I then said to it, and I have a fourth answer for you. You are asking for that which you are unaware of its aftermath. Perhaps you are requesting that which will harm you. The example of you is that of a fevered child asking for sweets, while your caretaker is more aware of what benefits. How not when he has said, عَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. Perhaps you hate a thing and it is better for you. Okay? When the correct perception ultimately crystallized for my soul with this answer, its calmness further increased. What does this mean? Here's how I usually get questions about dua. I'm asking Allah for something. Why isn't Allah giving it to me? But there's another part of that. I'm asking Allah to remove a hardship from me. Why isn't Allah removing the hardship from me? Especially when He says, أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَا وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. Who is He? Is He not the one who removes hardship when you call upon Him? So why is it that Allah is not taking away that hardship? So Ibn al-Jawzee rahimahullah ta'ala mentions, think about that fever child that wants those sweets, that person that's sick, that person that is calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala but not realizing that that hardship is bringing about some benefit in their life that they're not recognizing, that they're really, really not paying attention to, and probably won't reveal itself for a very, very long time. Because remember, Ibn al-Jawzee rahimahullah is saying he's making this dua in the midst of a very difficult time in his life. Okay, so he's speaking within that concept, in that context. Then he said, after it calmed down more, I said, and I have a fifth answer for you. Your request subtracts from your reward and lowers from your status. So His depriving you is in fact a gift from Him to you. Had you requested what would amend your hereafter instead, this would be better for you. And it is better for you that you understand what I have explained. My soul said back to me, I have strolled through the gardens of your explanations and finally understood. So this was the last thing here, okay? That I said to my soul, what you are asking, so I'm going to repeat this, okay? What you are asking, your request actually subtracts from your reward and lowers from your status. So His depriving you is in fact a gift from Him to you. Had you requested what would amend your hereafter instead, this would be better for you, and it is better for you that you understand what I have explained. Now, what is this talking about? Is it okay to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove hardship? Yes. All right? It is, in fact, sunnah. Okay? It's the prophets asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the removal of hardship. You're supposed to call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the removal of hardship, right? And you're supposed to have husn al-dhan, good expectation of Him, in fact, that when you call upon Him for the removal of hardship, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of removing that hardship, fully capable of removing that hardship. But what Ibn al-Jawzee rahimahullah is mentioning here is that the presence of that hardship was elevating your reward, and that's the greatest gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have given to you. What that speaks to on the Day of Judgment, and this is a difficult concept for us to swallow, but it's back to what we were talking about 2 days ago. The Prophet ﷺ said that on the Day of Judgment, when Ahlul Afiyah, the people that were left, that were spared, see Ahlul Bala, they see the people that were tested and the trials that were given to them, they would wish that they would have been from the people that were tested frequently. In fact, they would wish that they could have scissors to cut their skins. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ said, you would wish that Allah did not answer a single one of your du'as in this dunya, and He would have left all of them for the akhirah. You would wish that not a single one of your prayers was answered in this world, and that He would have left all of it for the hereafter. Because the reward in the hereafter, khayrun wa abqa, it's better and it's longer lasting. So you would wish that you didn't use it in this world. Now, some of you are thinking, well, that's great, doesn't solve my problem, so I'm still making dua. The Prophet ﷺ said, ask Allah for good. So this is solace for the person who enters, who goes through hardship and then meets Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and then is rewarded in the hereafter. But for me, I'm still going about my daily life. I'm still trying to do the best that I can in both the dunya and the akhirah. So how does this apply to me? And where do I fall in this entire category? This is where we come to the idea of delayed dua, delayed answers to your dua. If dua is not going to change my destiny, and this is the fear the Prophet ﷺ mentioned for a person, that eventually you say, what's the point of making dua? What's the point of making dua? If Allah is going to give me hardship or ease, regardless, in a way that's better for me, what's the point of making dua? Number one, to keep your connection to Him. That's the very first thing. To keep your connection to Him, because the Prophet ﷺ said, ad-du'a huwa al-ibadah. Supplication is worship. Number two, there are in fact things that will be changed because of dua. Decree, the divine decree could be changed because of dua if that dua for that change in divine decree was in your favor. In the same way that a person was thirsty and they drank water and they were nourished by it. Meaning, you may call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something and that alters your destiny. It actually alters your divine decree, but Allah gives it to you. Allah gives it to you ultimately because it's good for you. Okay? The third thing, realize that usually when you call upon Allah for something that you want, that is worldly and material in its nature, you will find that Allah will deprive you of it until you recognize that it's a want and not a need. I'm going to say that again. If you're calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a want, Allah may hold it back from you until you realize that your want is a want and not a need. When you treat your want like a need, it's an unhealthy addiction, an unhealthy material addiction. So that could be the very reason why Allah withholds it from you, because if He gives it to you, He will feed your materialism, He will feed your entitlement, He will feed your dunya addiction. And that's not good for you. Not because it offends Allah, not because Allah wants to punish you, not because Allah wants to hurt you. It's not good for you to get attached to a want and to treat that want like a need. Okay? Even just think about parenting, right? When you have a child, like, our kids are iPad addicts, so you got to limit their time on the iPad or limit their time on technology. Is anyone on an iPad right now? All right, you got to limit their time on technology. And, realistically speaking, so what? Right? I could just say, you know what? So what? What's the big deal? Go ahead, by all means. There's a very little possibility that you're not going to have access to an iPad in 10 years. By then, you'll have a robot that carries the iPad for you and holds it for you, and you tell the robot what to do for you, right? Allahu A'lam, right? But the point is that I can convince myself and say, well, it's there, it's accessible, and it's available, and it will be available to them. But it's not healthy for that child, because that child's not going to learn anything. That child's not going to develop any real skills. That child's not going to learn creativity and imagination and learn to power through and learn social skills. At that moment, looking at that child sitting on that iPad like this all day and laughing and smiling, you say, oh, they're so cute. Such good kids, mashallah. Not a peep. All right? You're ruining that child. You're a bad parent if you do that. No offense, by the way. But that's bad parenting. Okay? Allah never bad gods, all right? He doesn't do what's bad for you as a Rabb to a Abd, as a sustainer to a creation. So yes, Allah holds back from you because you have an unhealthy need for something that's supposed to be just a want. You call upon Him for a want as if it's a need, as if you can't live without it. So until that's broken, Allah holds it back from you, even though it pains you. And He doesn't like to pain you, but because it's good for you. And you need to develop through that. There's something that's happening to you, some growth that you are experiencing, some skills that you are developing, some priorities that you are shifting because of the presence of that hardship or the absence of what you are asking Allah for. And it's good for you. And you hate to hear it sometimes because we all know that there are times that we want what's bad for us to really be good for us. All right? We really want sometimes what's bad for us to be good for us. So we want to convince ourselves. And you can make your limited dimensional argument to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this is in fact good for me. But Allah knows that which you don't know. So many times Allah holds back from you because it is a want and you are treating your want like a need. Okay? Also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that the presence of a blessing sometimes will ruin you. And this was, subhanAllah, this was a khutbah that I gave I think it was a khutbah or it was a women's reflection class. The hadith of Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu. This is mind-blowing, all right? what Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu mentions, that a person calls upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something, saying, Ya Rab, my Lord, hatta yuyassara lahu, and then it is facilitated for that person, and the angels package that blessing, and they're bringing it on their way to that person, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the angels, just as it's about to come to that person, asrifuhu an, take it away from him. And the angels say, why? And Allah says, because if I give it to him, لو يسرته له, if I give it to him, then I'll have to punish him. فيظل العبد يطمع. The servant continues to have hopes and wish and say, سبقني فلان, دهاني فلان, this person preceded me, this person got it, I got left behind, I was deprived of it. وَمَا هُوَ إِلَّا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ. And the last part of the hadith is, and it was nothing but the bounty of Allah for that person that he held it back from you. So you imagine, just think of the imagery. The angels are bringing you something. You're about to get that ni'mah you've been asking for, that blessing, it's on its way. And then Allah says, hold it. Take it away from that person. Not because I hate them. They're great people, someone that I actually love. But if I give it to that person, then I'll have to punish them. What does that mean, by the way? If I give it to that person, I'll have to punish them. What does that mean? He may fall into shirk or something, let's say even less than shirk. He might fall into something that would cause him to sin. Because usually, though it should not be the case, usually when everything else is okay, then we don't care for our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Usually when everything else is in shambles, then we start to ask questions and dig deeper and make our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala good. So basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala withholds it from that person because the presence of that blessing would do something to that person's character or to that person's hereafter that would reduce their overall happiness and their overall sense of goodness. It would take away from what Allah has in store for them in the hereafter. It would do something to cause them to be more heedless. And the source of all goodness is that taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anything that would take away taqwa, that would make you less conscious of Allah and more heedless, is actually going to become very problematic. I'm about to finish, inshallah. Let me just finish, inshallah. Yeah. So what does this mean now in the ultimate, or the first question? What was the very first question that I asked? The very first question that I asked. I know it was like an hour ago. Anyone remember? Okay, fine. I'm making the dua for the right thing. I am asking Allah, I'm making istikhara, for example. What is it? Sorry. What were you going to say? Okay. All right. Alhamdulillah. So I'm making dua for something. It's not bad. I'm praying istikhara, for example. It's a good dua in its nature. At what point do I say, well, I don't know if Allah is withholding this from me because it's bad for me, or if I should keep on making dua? So that's where the question now comes in. All right, sort of like this last question that I think that a lot of people need to have resolved. Like, how many times do I pray istikhara, for example? Okay? Like, do I pray istikhara for the rest of my life? It's like the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he instructed young people to get married, and he said, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَعَلَيْهِ بِالصَّوْمِ. Then that person should fast if you cannot get married. And then someone says, I can't fast my entire life, Like at some point, Siyam is great and all, but I can't do this forever. And nor am I meant to do this forever, all right? So the same thing with dua. Like, all right, am I supposed to be, like, let's say I identified a person. This usually comes on the topic of marriage. إِذَا أَتَاكَ مَنْ تَرْضَوْنَ دِينَهُ وَخُلُقَهُ فَزَوِّجُوا. If someone comes to you of good religion and good character, then marry that person. Let's say that I found a religious person, I like that person for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is all great. I pray istikhara and it's not working out, and I'm making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ease it, and I'm not really sure what's happening here, and I keep on going and going and going, and then like 2 years have passed and I'm still wondering if I should still have hope that I'm going to marry this person or not. This is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leaves things to your intuition. But at the same time, if you are obsessed with a particular outcome, that's probably a sign that it's an unhealthy pursuit. if you're obsessed with a particular outcome, even if it's a good outcome in its nature, that's probably a sign that it's an unhealthy pursuit and that you should use your best judgment, your best intuition, and move on to another pursuit while still asking Allah for the best. All right? It was really interesting. There was a brother, and this is a true story, by the way. And I know sometimes I got to use the anonymity because I know someone might be watching. There was a brother who made this dua, istikhara, like he wanted to marry a particular sister. And, there was some difficulty that was there, and he was really sad about it. So then he made istikhara for another girl. He got married to that girl. She got married to another guy. And then they both got divorced, and they both ended up getting married, and now they're one of the happiest couples ever. So at his wedding, he's like, Sheikh, help me understand this. Like, what just happened here? All right, like alhamdulillah, I'm glad I finally got the girl and everything worked out. All right, but like that was a weird journey for me, right? And it actually happened quite rapidly. It all happened like within a year and a half. Okay, so he's like, help me understand what just happened and how istikhara works. And you know what? That brother and that sister getting married and it not working out, there's a hidden blessing in that as well. So it's not just that I made the dua and it didn't work out, so that means that my istikhara was broken or I didn't get something good from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe there's something that I took from that or something that I learned from that or something that I gained from that in the akhirah sense, which cannot be quantified, that I'm not capable of grasping. And there's a lesson in that, and I should praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that too. I did everything right, and it didn't happen the way I wanted it to happen. But something happened that eventually will reveal itself as having been good for you. If not in this life, then in the next. So how does it work? At what point do I give up on making a dua for something or on a pursuit? First and foremost, lessen my obsession with the outcome. Because any obsession with an outcome is not healthy. Even if it's a good outcome. Lessen my obsession with an outcome. The next thing, if your pursuit is obsessive or if it's unhealthy, if you're not willing to engage or indulge other pursuits as well that are also good, because maybe that pursuit. So there is nothing that's found in the hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ or the books of Tazkiyah that says you should pray istikhara 20 times. It's all conjecture. Like there are some scholars that would say you could pray it for 99 years. All right, just keep on praying istikhara. Some scholars that say pray it one time and that's it, move on. Like you'll find, this is actually a healthy debate in the books of Tazkiyah. There are some scholars that said just pray istikhara once for something, khalas. And some of them said pray it 7 times, and some of them said pray it like as much as you want, unlimited. The truth is that at some point you take hints and you redirect your pursuit while asking Allah to bring about the best of a situation. So let's say I moved on from something, but I'm still asking Allah for the best of my situation as a whole. So if Allah brings that back around, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. But at the same time, I can't stay stuck. So I have to look at my obsession and the way that I'm addicted to a pursuit, and that can be unhealthy even if the outcome is necessarily a good outcome, okay, or good in my estimation. Now obviously, when it comes to ibadah, the Prophet ﷺ says, "Inna Allah la yamallu hatta tamallu." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not tire of you until you tire of calling upon Him. All right, so Inna Allah la yamallu min al-istighfar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not tire of granting you forgiveness until you tire of seeking forgiveness. So when you're asking for ibadah, you're asking for forgiveness, when you're asking for something that's good in the religious sense, then keep on going. And at no point does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, okay, look, you've made too many du'as for this thing now, you can stop now. Every single time there's an outcome that is coming from that. The one constant has to be your understanding of the nature of your relationship with Him and the priorities that you have of ultimate felicity in the hereafter. That the happiness that you gain in this dunya is not at the expense of your happiness in the hereafter. And that any misfortune that you encounter in this world is directly converted into a happiness in the hereafter. and you live between those two stations, and that calms the soul, as Ibn al-Jawzee rahimahullah mentioned. I'm going to leave you with one more thing, because this is where the holier than thou can take over. So let's remove the holier than thou thing. Ibn Rajab rahimahullah, he actually mentions, he writes about this. He said some of the righteous, they felt too shy to ask Allah for something. But he said it was narrated that some of the companions used to make dua even for salt for their dough, or for like the most minuscule of things, the most minor of things, because they enjoyed calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they understood that calling upon Allah was a blessing in and of itself. And that's why Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, when I make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I don't worry about the answer, I just worry about the blessing of making dua. Because I know that the outcome will happen in the way that's best. I just worry about the ability to make dua. If I'm able to make dua, then I'm pleased. If I'm not able to make dua, then I'm scared. Because at-tawfiq ila du'a huwa ijaba wa ni'ma. To just be guided to the ability to make dua is in and of itself an answer and a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Sahaba would ask Allah to repair their shoelaces. So Ibn Rajab rahimahullah basically said religious people need to calm down. He said no one's going to be better than the Sahaba. So he actually writes like a condemnation, admonishing those people that say don't ask too much for dunya. Ask Allah all you want, but don't get addicted to the pursuit. Ask Allah for all good, just don't get addicted to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And let your dua always be proportional to where you're asking more for the hereafter, because that's where your priority actually lies. Wallahu ta'ala alam. All right, questions. I know there are probably a lot of questions. Tafadhal.
They will be looking at Ahl al-Bala and wishing that they had that much Bala to be close. And there is a dua of, oh Allah, whatever you give people with the Bala, give it to us with Afiyah. I don't know if that's actually just a dua or it's actually a hadith. Like you can go by that as a way to get close to Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. But does that mean that unless you go into some really difficult hardship, you will not be of the muqarrabeen or people of high status? So can you elaborate on that, please?
So you actually, what you just mentioned, it's one of the series that I'm doing on prayers of the pious. Allahumma in kunta ballaghta ahadan min ibadika as-salihin darajatan bi bala'in faballighniha bil afiyah. One of the Salaf, the pious predecessors, I forget which one it was, but he said, "Oh Allah, if you have delivered someone to a particular station with trial, then deliver me to that same station with ease, bil afiyah." And where the Prophet ﷺ said, don't ask Allah for patience, ask Allah for al-afiyah, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be spared. So the irony that you ask Allah for afiyah, you ask Allah to be spared, but at the same time, on the Day of Judgment, the people of afiyah would mostly wish that they weren't people of afiyah. So how does that make sense? Because if you ask Allah for afiyah, if you ask Allah to be spared, what Allah gives you as a result of that is irrelevant to the station that He will deliver you to. But if you are distracted by your afiyah, distracted by the ease that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you, which is the majority of people, then on the Day of Judgment, that would be what gets you out of your ghafla, out of your heedlessness. So for example, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-yadul ulya khayru min al-yad as-sufla." The upper hand is better than the lower hand. Al-yadul ulya hiya al-munfiqa. The upper hand is the giving hand, the lower hand is the receiving hand. So it's better to be a person giving charity than a person receiving charity. But he also said the majority of the people of paradise are poor people. The majority of the people of paradise are poor people. You don't seek out poverty. You don't seek out poverty. But most people are distracted by their wealth. So ask Allah for halal wealth and then do what's best by it. So no, you don't have to go through immense hardship and tribulation to reach the station of al-muqarrabeen, of those who are closest to Allah. And the diversity of the Sahaba shows. Some of the companions were humble, downtrodden, and that was their path to Jannah. And some of them were Abu Bakr's, Uthman's, and Abu Talha's. Their wealth was their path to Jannah. Okay, their relative ease in life was actually their path to Jannah. So the point is that you make dua for what you think is good, and then you accept whatever happens to you as truly being good. All right? So you make dua for what your perception of good is, but then you accept the outcome as inherently good because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control. But the station is irrelevant in that entire thing. But it is indeed true that sometimes people will ask Allah for ease and Allah will withhold the ease because the hardship is what they need to keep them out of heedlessness. And that's a rahmah from Allah to a person. It's a mercy from Allah to a person. Some people quickly get a big head and get distracted by their wealth or get distracted by their ease. So Allah snaps them out of it, and it's for their own good. Even though they're asking Allah for wealth and asking Allah for alleviation, it's better that you stay in this way for your hereafter. Is your follow-up really quick, inshallah? Go ahead. Okay, bismillah.
You mentioned about making dua and then at some point letting something go that like at some point you feel that maybe this is enough, maybe I should move on. How about if it's something of akhirah, for example? You really want to go to umrah. You cannot, you can't tell if this is you really, it's not working, it's not happening, then, you should. How about if this is amal of a'mal al-akhirah? And then also tied to that is how a lot of time you want to do something that's related to akhirah, but you cannot really tell the value of that work. Like there's no way for you to know this is good or not good. It should be always good, right? So can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, so when I say to someone, make the intention for Hajj, I'll pray istikhara, inshallah. No. You can pray istikhara on which package of Hajj, but you don't pray istikhara for Hajj. You just make the intention and do your thing, okay? Because there is no istikhara with amal al-akhirah, okay? There's no istikhara. There's no if when it comes to a good deed. You just ask Allah to facilitate the good deed for you. So you can ask Allah for umrah all the time, and you can badly want to go to umrah, and that's great, okay? And your badly wanting to go to umrah will cause you to get the reward of umrah even if you never actually make it there. Okay, so keep on asking, inshallah ta'ala, on those things. All right, let me just read this. If the dua is not a want for dunya, but actually a need for akhirah, like the need for a child to be obedient to Allah, and Allah may be testing for my previous baggage or heedlessness. And the du'as do make me closer to Allah, but what about the fate of the child? How to get over that grief and worry? Wow, that's a loaded question. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help you through that. First and foremost, no one carries the burden of another person. So Allah will not force someone into disobedience to punish you. Okay, so it's not like you committed a sin earlier on in your life, and so for that reason, Allah will take a person who's deserving of goodness and a person who's, who actually would have been destined for good had it not been for your sin. Okay? So every single person bears their own burden. And this is, again, the perfection of that equilibrium and the way that everything works with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So though the effects of sin may tarnish your household, the ultimate destiny of a person is irrelevant or is untouched by your actions and by what you do, okay, or what you have done. So a person should not think that that I'm causing my child to go to hell because of something that I did when I was a child. That doesn't make sense. It's not that there's no connection between the two. However, for example, you see the effects of disobedience to your parents sometimes in disobedience of your own children. Like that's something that can actually be found. And that's just the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan works. But at the same time, your child's ultimate fate has nothing to do with your previous sin. So seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is good for bringing about good results in your life. It may be that as a mercy to you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides that person. Because if you think about it in the hereafter, the concept of the intercession, of the righteous interceding on behalf of those that were not so righteous. As a gift to the righteous, sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rescues those that aren't so righteous. But at the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never punish someone else as a punishment to a disobedient person, because that's unjust. So Allah's mercy will sometimes cover those that don't quote unquote deserve to be covered, but Allah's justice will prevent him from ever harming those that don't deserve to be harmed or those that don't deserve to be punished. So making dua for your child's guidance, asking Allah to guide them, keep doing so. Keep trying to be the best parent. And understand that ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allot for each person their portion. Okay, will allot for each person their portion. And by the way, your dua could be the difference between, for example, your child being a major sinner or completely being a disbeliever. It could be your dua and your parenting that saves them from that. And ultimately, that means something in the scales. That means something in the scales. Now, for you, you don't see that. You just see, I'm making dua and my child is still a major sinner. But your dua was also the reason or the decider between iman and kufr, which is far more precious, right, and far more important. So don't give up the dua for your child, and don't guilt trip yourself and connect it to something that you did in some past part of your life. Instead, think healthy and think positive, inshallah ta'ala, and move in that direction. All right, you had your hand up. You know, how about you, all three of you ask your questions? Yeah, you go first.
Most people, when they do dua, they think they did. Okay. For 25, like, they think they did.
No, I can hear you.
What do I need to?
Maybe you're holding it wrong. Here, let Ibrahim hold it for you.
They think they did it for 25 minutes, but they actually did it for like under 5 minutes. How do they make the dua longer?
So they thought they did dua for 25 minutes, but it actually ended up being less than 5 minutes? How did they make the dua longer? Is that the question? Okay. So how do you make your dua longer? Yeah? All right. The way you can make your dua longer is you can prepare for your dua by thinking about the things you didn't make dua for. All right? So for example, you can say, well, I need to make dua for forgiveness. I need to make dua for my parents. I need to make dua for my whatever it may be. There are certain things I can make dua for. So have more things to make dua for. And at the same time, you can also say some of the sunnah du'as in between, inshallah ta'ala, so that you can keep your dua going. And maybe you shouldn't jump from 5 to 25. Maybe you can jump from 5 to 10 and then 10 to 15 and stuff. All right. Yeah, you're next.
Advancements.
Here, Ibrahim, you hold the microphone.
The advancements in technology seems to be making us more hasty. So are the advancements in technology are good or bad?
Are the advancements in technology good or bad? Should we all use American Online? We should use American Airlines because a lot of brothers from VRIC work at American Airlines, mashallah. Should we try to reduce our dependency on technology? Yes, we should try to reduce our dependency on technology. So use as little of it as you can, inshallah ta'ala. Try not to get addicted to it. And is the overall advancement of technology good or bad? It's good when it's used for good things. So use technology for good things, inshallah. But don't get too addicted. Learn how to live without it too. And avoid the bad things that come with technology. All right, last question from the kids, then I'll move over to sisters and then back. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it okay to ask for shirk? Is it okay to ask for hardship?
You scared me there.
Hardship.
All right, hardship. Okay, I just want to see You see your dad? Your dad's breathing hard. What are you doing to your parents? Is it okay to ask Allah for hardship? No, it's not okay to ask Allah for hardship. Don't ask Allah for hardship. But you accept hardship when it comes to you. If it comes to you, you accept it with goodness and with grace, inshallah ta'ala. You say alhamdulillah and you remain patient. But you only ask Allah for ease. Okay? Now go give your dad a hug and tell him you're not going to ask for shirk. All right. Yeah. Can you say that? So can you elaborate a little further?
I've heard of some people. I've heard of some people for guidance in the Quran, but for some reason, somehow they come out at the end of it not having found whatever they were looking for. Is it because, you know, how Fatiha is the opening, you know, table of contents, it's the dua that basically unlocks the guidance in the Quran. Was there something defective? Did they not perfect their Fatiha where they like really believed with conviction every single element of Fatiha? Thus, the guidance was not unlocked for them? Like,
Okay.
how does that work?
No, I see your question now. So basically, Fatiha is like a prerequisite to the rest of the Quran, right? That you have to be in pursuit of hidayah. So what is it that I'm not finding the guidance in the Quran? There are different reasons for which our hearts may not be able to absorb what's in the Quran. Intellectually, guidance is one thing. So the Quran is mubin, it's very clear, right? There's no ambiguity in the guidance it provides at that level. And of course, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ elaborates what the Quran looks like in practiced form. So there's no ambiguity to the Quran and to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in the overall direction and guidance that it gives to a person's life. So my being deprived of it could be as malicious as stubbornness, or as innocent as distraction. So it could be as malicious as arrogance, and I don't want to accept what's in the Quran, and I can figure this out on my own, and I don't need this for guidance. Or it could just be that I'm really distracted and need to take steps to remove distraction. So sin is a reason that locks the heart, right, from the Quran. Arrogance is a reason that locks the heart from the Quran. And distraction is not what locks the heart from the Quran, but doesn't allow you to properly absorb the Quran. So you have to find what that reason is and identify it, and then treat it, inshallah ta'ala, to the best of your ability. But don't ever despair on it. So that's actually, you know, access to a divine conversation. It's one thing to say, I'm going to start reading Quran, but when I really start understanding the gravity of it and appreciating that these are the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that takes time. So a divine conversation takes time, but at the same time, the first step is humbling yourself to the Quran, to the clear directives of the Quran, and the clear directives of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Allah Alam. Any other sisters? While the mic's over there? Okay, go ahead.
It's a little bit of a complicated question, but if you are praiseworthy in the sight of Allah, feeling like I feel like if you ask Allah for something, it's kind of not being satisfied with what you have. So, like feeling shy to ask Allah for something is more praiseworthy in the sight of Allah, or going to Allah with your wishes and, you know, asking Him?
So is the
So
ask it one more time, inshallah. The mic cut a few times, so I just want to make sure I understood it, inshallah. Go ahead.
Okay.
If you want, you can even put the mic down and just ask. I can hear you, inshallah.
So what is better in the sight of Allah? Going to Him and asking Him about, you know, like I've heard that you should not feel shy to ask Allah because He's the one who gives, and you should not think that this is difficult for Allah to give me, right? Mm-hmm. That's one way of, you know, one thing to do. Another thing is feeling shy to ask Allah because He's already given you so much. So, like, you know, out of that shyness, you don't ask Allah for something because you feel that, how can I ask Him when He has already blessed me with so much? So what is more praiseworthy in the sight of Allah? Having that gratitude and being satisfied with what you have, or going to Him and asking Him?
There are times that you should. So the Prophet ﷺ said as a general rule, فَاسْأَلُوا اللَّهُ أَكْثَرُ. Ask Allah is more. So you can never ask Allah too much. And this is sort of the admonishment, once again, of Al-Hafidh ibn Rajab rahimahullah, to those that say that you should be too shy to ask Allah for smaller things and things of this dunya. He said the Sahaba used to ask Allah for everything, including their dough and their shoelaces. So ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because it establishes a relationship. That does not necessitate that you are ungrateful to Allah for what you already have. The way that you approach Allah in dua is that, oh Allah, you've already given me so much to praise you for, so I'm asking you more to praise you for. Not, oh Allah, I don't have enough, so give me. Okay? So it's about your internal approach. And there should be times where you just call upon Allah with thana, with praise, without talab, without asking. There should be times where it's just alhamdulillah. That's a practice in and of itself. But that should not preclude you from asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all of your wishes, inshallah ta'ala, so long as they're halal, obviously. All right. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So I basically have a question about Zamzam water. One of the brothers asked me if it was possible to take a shower with Zamzam water, and if you did, would it wash away all your sins?
That'd be pretty awesome. Is that?
No, that was a serious question. It didn't
no, I know. Is it the full question? I mean, just like.
Yeah, it was that. And does it also, with Zamzam water, does it also hold the same significance as Quranic water?
Okay, those are actually good questions. So, in the same way, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that doing wudu, right, that the wudu washes away the sins. And the Prophet ﷺ says, "Az-Zamzam lima shuriba lahu." Zamzam is for what you drink it for. Meaning, if you drink it for cure, if you drink it with du'a for something, if you drink it for nourishment, that you will find in it what you drink of it. To my knowledge, there is the washing of the body with Zamzam as a means of washing sins is not established in any narration that I can think of, because the Prophet ﷺ said, "Lima shuriba lahu," for what it is, for what you drink it for. But in the overall spiritual sense, which is again, the wudu, for example, washes away sins. And so the Prophet ﷺ said to exaggerate in your wudu in the proximity of what you touch with your wudu, not in wasting water, but in making sure that you touch the, all of the parts of wudu with the water, because it washes away all of those sins. As far as the distinction between Quranic water, I'm assuming you mean in ruqya, when someone recites on water, or with Zamzam, they can actually be brought together. So Zamzam water could be recited on, and that could be used in the process of ruqya as well. Allahu a'lam. All right, last question, inshallah. Yes. Is it for something that's good or for something that's neutral? Right. So if you're asking Allah constantly in dua, isn't that a good sign, even if it's not necessarily happening? Yes, because the Prophet ﷺ only admonished the person who gives up on their dua and says, what's the point of dua anyway? So the fact that you're still making dua is a good thing. The problem is only if you're getting frustrated in the lack of the answer to that dua. Wallahu a'lam. All right, jazakumullahu khairan, subhanallahi wa bihamdihi, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.